All right. We are ready to continue our program. Our next speaker, Annette Mees. She has made immersive theater playful experiences for over 20 years. Last 3 years, she has led the audience labs at the Opera House in London, an innovation lab bringing creatives, artists, and technology companies to contemporary opera and ballet experiences that break new artistic expression. She's saying that theater makers should work with technologists, not because technology is cool, not because everyone else is doing it, and certainly because we want to save theater. Technologies offer a chance to explore how we may, using centuries of stagecraft that speaks to the collective imagination. We can broaden how we connect to stories and how we to one another. Let's put our hands together. Annette Mees.
Hi. Well, this is exciting. I also like that I'm TBD. I'm Annette. You are my first audience in almost 2 years. Thank you so much. I'll try and keep it professional despite, we're all being so excited to be in an actual space. There will be later. I'm going to talk to you about theatre. This is a Peter Brook quote. I can take a space and call it a bare stage. A man walks across this empty space while someone else is watching him. And this is all for an act of theatre to be engaged. I mean, it's very male, but it's great. I mean, he really had this mission to think, this is the 60s, and he really wanted to take theatre out of buildings and really reimagine where it could take place and what was needed for it. Do you need all of this, or could it be anything? He wanted to reinvigorate the theatre in a way that wasn't tied to language, but to emotion. So basically, he's saying any space can be a stage. So for me, that means that digital spaces can be stages too. That we just need something to be performed, something to be created in that space, and someone needs to watch it, and that becomes theatre. So for me, art and culture just offers a space to come together, to reimagine the world, to laugh, to cry, to do all the emotional stuff that really is at the core of what we want. And Sarah's talk was talking about it as well. We want to connect to each other, we want to have shared experiences, we want to feel alive, and we want to reflect together on how we want to live together. So for me, digital spaces can be stages, and really a space for public imagination. Like, how do we come together and imagine what we want to be together? I like the quote from Stella Adler that says, the word theatre comes from the Greeks. It means the seeing place. It is a place where people come to see the truth about life and the social situation. The theatre is a spiritual and social X-ray of its time. So for me, this is what it's about, right? Like, how do we come together and reimagine how we want to live together, how we reimagine ourselves in the world? We want to laugh, we want to cry, we want to connect to each other, humanity, all of the things that are truly important. Now, I love when Sarah talks about the metaverse and brings it back to the old Greeks, and I'm going, that's what we did in the theatre, and it feels like there's so much potential. It can be so many things, anything, basically, but this. We've already seen this. So if not that, then what? So I've been doing this for a very long time. I started out as a theatre director and then did immersive theatre, a lot of stuff on location with large audiences that could influence the show and be part of the show and in the show. And really, I started working with technology quite early on, like 15, 20 years ago, to just make theatre magic. And that just felt so full of potential. that I sort of went on with that. I became an artistic director, I commissioned a lot of this work, and then I became a creative fellow for Wired, and I really started doing the opposite. Like, what does it mean to bring theatrical thinking to technology? If we bring these two things together, what can we do? I then became the head of the audience labs at the Royal Opera House. So they really wanted to set up an innovation program. I come out of theatre rather than opera and ballet, but opera and ballet are like these epic theatre forms. For me, really exciting because they're music-driven. So where theatre is often story beat, story beat, story beat, a bit like cinema, twist, turn, opera and ballet where they're just all about the feels in essence. It's about the music. The story is just there, almost like a fable, to take you on a journey where you can feel all the emotions, where you can really engage with your heart. It's less about the brain. Sorry, there's a lot going on the side stage, so I keep being distracted ever so slightly. So this was the audience app. So what we decided to do with it is to just set up a space for exploration. We decided that was the thing that was most necessary, like a space where really pioneering artists and like technology companies, creative technologists, individuals could come together and just break things and then invent them anew. We wanted it to be boundary breaking. We didn't want to repeat things. We wanted it to feel fresh and new. We wanted it to be contemporary. We wanted it to feel from now. But we also wanted it to be opera and ballet experiences. So something that was really rooted in those centuries of stagecraft. And that for us was the thing. I sometimes call it slightly radical, where we wanted to be radical, but also keep in mind what we wanted to keep from the old art forms, from the emotional arcs that were present in other forms of theatre and other forms of technology and experience design. So we made a lot of work in that time. Some was pure R&D, some public-facing. We had a whole range of partners, which I think is really important, like just trying lots of different things. We worked with Google, but also the National Ballet of Canada. We worked with a South London hip-hop magazine, hip-hop, poetry and music coming together, opera, poetry, music coming together. So we did that, but also worked with ballet stars. We worked with really radical digital artists and with award-winning opera makers. So a real range. But I'm just going to show you one now, because I have only so much time. So this is Current Rising. It's a hyper-reality opera. I will show you a little video that tells you what that is. Let's start with the video, and I'll tell you more. So this was on a couple of months ago. Let's see if this plays. Yes. Current Rising is the world's first opera created specifically for hyperreality.
Well, hyperreality is virtual reality plus. So we take the standard virtual reality headset and you have a backpack computer which gives you sort of the best possible visual quality that you can get at this point in time. And then we add to that. So firstly you have multi-users. You also have a physical space that's dedicated to the experience. As you move around in virtual reality, you're physically moving around in real space.
So we're opening Current Rising in the Royal Opera House on the Limbury stage. So the audience enter the theatre, go onto the stage and start their experience there.
This is my first experience of virtual reality. I just knew that I would be impressed and immersed.
We were so into it that it just felt very, very real.
It was exciting, it was mesmerising, I just loved it.
I thought it was exhilarating.
Sometimes deeply meditative.
It's like nothing I've seen before.
It's completely unlike anything I've ever felt or heard. I mean, it's poetic, it's meditative, it's totally all-consuming and beautiful.
So this was on just a few months ago in London. We did a 3.5-week run. It was a complete success. We sold all the tickets. We had the critics embracing it. And I think for me, that's amazing. But also, I think what's really important to know is when we started, we didn't know what the hell this was. We didn't know even what the words hyper-reality opera really meant. It felt like something we wanted to do, but it didn't really exist. So for me, when I joined the Opera House, like, when I think about opera, it's big, it's epic. And for me, the sense that I could step into a world like that felt really exciting. I saw this Star Wars experience where you got to be a stormtrooper. It lasted 10 minutes. You get to shoot lots of things, very exciting. And I saw that and I was like, this feels very operatic. This technology feels like it has the potential to have that epicness that's inherent in the art form. So the idea was there, but the idea was really a series of words. It was the idea that one can feel opera if one is in it, that it could be visceral, that you can touch things. You know, when the city comes out, you saw that comes from underneath your feet and the whole floor rumbles, and it's sort of mildly mind-blowing, really. And I wanted it, again, it just felt right. So for me, where I then start is to find a team. There's a real different start, which is finding the money. But I'm going to start when we had the money. So for me, when I really think about projects and how to make them, I think casting ensemble are key. So one of the things I do a lot in my job is, in essence, finding friends to a certain extent. It's trying to find a technology that really works, but then it's not about the technology, it's really about finding the technologists, the company, the individuals that can do it and who get it. So for me, the first thing was to find a technology partner, someone who could do hyperreality. There's not that much choice, but it was so clear when I walked into Figment, you saw Simon, so I tried a dinosaur experience that they had. It was amazing. I fed a little dinosaur. It was very unoperatic. But as soon as I said the words, "What about an opera, but you're in it?" to Simon, there was a light that went on, and immediately there was a dialogue, and we got it. He got it. We got the sort of I call it the artistic nucleus, the why we want to do this. What is it that we want people to feel? Why is this exciting beyond that you can do it? There is a why you want to do it, and then it becomes about bringing everyone else together. So for me, I brought together quite a traditional opera team, like an amazing opera director called Nisha Jones, a composer, Samantha Fernando, this amazing set designer I've worked with a lot, who does a lot of immersive theatre, but also large-scale opening ceremonies. So she really understood scale. And then you take those people and make them into an ensemble. So we spend time talking about what opera was. What is opera? What did we want to keep about opera? And there are no right answers about this. This is just what you as this team want. So for us, the human voice is really important, but traditional narrative is less important. Another group might do the opposite and going, actually, it's all about large instrumentation and the human voice is not. There are no right answers. There are the decisions that we made as an ensemble with the creative team that came out of opera and the team that would do the technology. We spent 4 days in a room where we saw a lot of work. We saw a lot of VR work. I remember Figment brought us some Cirque du Soleil stuff, and they were like, "We're really proud. This is really cool." And the creative team was like, "Ugh, this is awful. I don't like the people in it. They feel like robots." And for me, that's where ensemble lies. It's creating a common language to talk about what's important. What is it that we're making here? What is our taste? What do we like? What we don't like? What are our references? So we spend time on casting ensemble. The next one, it's a bit boring. Oh, by the way, the URL, I've put a URL under there. I wrote a whole report on loads of things that we did. If you're interested to read more, because, 25 minutes, there is something you can download there, and you can just see lots of stuff. Iteration, I think everyone in this room knows it. I didn't know what a hyperreality opera was. We learned more and more what it was. We showed it to people. We did things. We felt like when we make work, definitely in theatre, we go into a rehearsal room, and then sometimes you sort of go, "Oh, this looked right on paper, but now I'm in it. It just doesn't feel right. And we're really good at not questioning that, just going, this doesn't feel right, let's move on and try and find what does feel right. So we iterated a lot. This was also, again, really important to make sure that the vocabulary we developed did the thing it needed to do. So our set designer worked really closely with the CGI artist. They had epic conversations about texture that, to be honest, were boring as to me, but really important for them, so that they could both become the best artists they could be in that collaboration, iteration. It's an oldie, but it's worth saying that you can't have an idea and then do it. It's just not how it works when you do something new. You have an idea that feels fruitful, you understand why you're doing it, and then you iterate towards the discovery of what it is you were always meant to make. I think audiences, we think about it a lot. We had, to be honest, with this particular one, so I like to bring audiences in that iterative process. With this one, because COVID, it was very, very limited, but we still did, and we still tried to bring some people through. I think the other thing that's just really exciting to us, so Current Rising, as you probably got from that video, doesn't have any live performance in it, because that means it can tour anywhere. So we put it on the stage at the Royal Opera House because we could, and because it sort of allowed us to open the building in a not quite post-COVID time when 4 audiences could go in simultaneously and social distance, when we couldn't open our main spaces. But it can pop up in a shopping mall, it can pop up in it can be in a foyer, but it could also be sort of in a public square or in a festival. So we're currently looking at, can we tour it? Because obviously we can only do that now. Now it's made. And I think the thing that I really wanted to learn is how you talk about this work and audiences, and which audiences were attracted to it. So there is some audience research. Again, I think it's not quite on the website yet, but it will be on the website soon. We worked with the university, and they just did loads of audience research for us, and it was amazing. So 31% of our audience had never been to the Opera House or an opera, which is insane for any operatic production. 68% of that 31% was under 35, which again is not necessarily what happens there. But also it was vice versa. 52% had never experienced virtual reality before, and a lot of those people were regular Royal Opera House goers. So there was this sort of gorgeous cross-pollination of audiences. There was an audience that really loved opera. 21%, I don't have that number here, I think it's 21%, had been in the Opera House last year. You need to love opera if you've been in COVID to an opera house. So we had both really, we had a very older audience and a very young audience, and that it's that cross-pollination that these new art forms create, this sort of these groups that come together because they come into the metaverse via different rabbit holes, different connection points, but they have experiences together. I think there's something super exciting about that for me coming out of theatre, but also the other way of technology adoption and as we're trying to find out together what it means. So I'm doing Audience Labs Beyond. I mean, it's not what it's called, but it seemed nice in this context at the moment. So what we're doing is we've been invited by university to bring Audience Labs there for a year, and really, this is King's College in London. I have to name them, obviously. And we're really going to host a series of gatherings of experts from across different industries. So there's people from broadcast, from creative technology, from immersive tech, from games, from theatre, different theatres, opera and ballet, but also immersive theatre, really to look how we work together, because that feels like the big question right now. Is like, there's so much possible. What do we want? What do we want the future of performance to look like? What do we want the future of technology to look like? What do we want our collaborations to look like? So the 4 things I'm looking at is artistic innovation. So how do we make good art? Because there is quite a lot of not so good art out there, which is great because we're really at the start of figuring this out. Sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't, but it's nice to have a conversation about what is the spaces that we need as creatives, as artists, as interdisciplinary teams to be good. Because maybe that's not a rehearsal room, and maybe that's not a design studio, maybe that's a third space. The cultural metaverse, I mean, the metaverse has been super well set out earlier. So for me, the cultural metaverse is that not Zuckerberg one, it's that idea of if we're building these digital spaces where we gather, where we congregate, where we spend part of our time together or apart, like what's the role of culture there? What is the technology that we need, the technology that we want when we create culture? We just should be, again, a space for public imagination. How do we create that? Who do we need to get involved? Obviously, ethics, diversity and inclusion, all of the things where we like, if culture does this, can it do it well? Please, can it not replicate some of the problems of technology, nor some of the problems of art and culture, but how do we do it well? And then obviously, towards net zero, I mean, you can't ignore it. It is the world right now. Some playwrights said recently to me, if you have a story without climate change in it now, it is science fiction, which I quite like as a sort of frame. It's part of our narrative. And I think, again, with technology, especially in culture, international collaboration is super important. Like we have the local and the people on our doorstep, and we want to engage those, and then we want to bring them to the world and the world to them. We want to work, we want to connect people and communities and stories, and I think technology is so insanely great at that. There's so many different ways of doing that in a meaningful way that theatre could really learn from, which again can help us look at new production models, which is really great. So, in short, I want to innovate beautifully. I think that, for me, is the joy and the power of bringing together theatre and technology. I think both of them are so inventive, so creative, and so willing to break things. Like rehearsal rooms are continuous looking for how can we do things differently, how can we improve on what we're doing. And I find the same with the creative technologies and the companies I work with. For me, it is we are at this point where we need to make it personal and emotional. You know, technology sometimes alienates, not always, but it can. So where it really soars for me is when it brings us together in new and meaningful ways. I think theatre is a great shared experience where I think it's what we need right now. We need to bring together communities across the world, do it with ethics and inclusion and meaning at the heart of it. I think it's really helpful to embrace the centuries of stagecraft from the theatre, but then also really embrace the magic that technology has to offer, so that we together can explore how to make these new public spaces for theatre and collective imagination. Thank you. Monica?
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean,
how did it feel to be here with a live audience?
It's sort of like coming home a little bit. I've spent a lot of my adult time life in theatres, and it's so nice. But I'm very much a director. I'm very much not a performer, so it's also I'm the wrong side of the stage right now.
You were saying that you work with interdisciplinary teams, so that's a hard word.
Interdisciplinary, yeah. I've practiced a lot.
So there would be like theater people, and then there would be like the tech people. So you are usually maybe somewhere in the intersection. So how does it work? Do you have like a common process, or do you have to invent everything?
Yeah, I think for me, this is part of the joy, right? If you make something that doesn't exist yet, it means the creative process doesn't exist. So you get to invent the creative team, who's on it, who's important, who needs to be included in which conversations. So in the beginning, we often do everything together for a little while till we figure that out. But we really invent the process as much as we invent the thingamajig at the end of it, because we bring together different practices. So that's really part of job. And for me, that's exciting because it means that there is a space where everyone is an expert and nobody knows. And that's a really beautiful thing to bring together, where you know, when you make standard theatre, you know, great, but on stage-based theatre, like the designer knows when the model box comes in, when that goes into production, what a tech period looks like, and you know, the luxury of having 3 weeks or the not so luxury of having a week. We all know how it works, and we adapt for each show, and each show is different. But in this kind of work, that interdisciplinary work, nobody knows. Nobody really knows what it takes for the CGI artist to be at their best in conversation with a theatre set designer. So we need to figure that out as we go along. And again, that's why iteration comes in. So we build, while we're building, we're learning where we're good and where it's not so good. And so for me, it just brings a lot of joy because it's really great when nobody knows. Like you all get a little, everyone needs to be a little bit open and a little bit vulnerable and sort of going, I thought you might like this. And then people go, oh God, no. maybe less late or, you know, something. But it really, I remember talking to Nisha and Joe. So Nisha is the director of that one, the opera director, and Joe Scotcher is the set designer of it. And they both sort of said that it completely changed how they might work on traditional stages as well, just because the process has opened up a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching opera, a new way of being creative within their practice as super experienced and gloriously talented storytellers. I think that's fun. And the same thing I get from the technology company. They go, the artist, we thought we knew what they would ask for, and they were often just wrong because the artists they sort of go, but what about? And they go, oh yeah, well, yeah, that's absolutely possible. And it's that sort of give and take and knowing when to stop, but also just leaning into the strengths. Like, what works? We know this from theatre. Some things work really well, some things don't work so well on stage, so we have to figure that out in the particular technology, like what looks good, what doesn't look so good, it's fun. It's genuinely discovery. And that's a fun place to make art from. That openness is baked into the process, which sometimes is so hard when you're making your 17th show, to be like, to find the emotion, the visceralness. I think it sort of comes naturally with this, it's why I do it.
One last question. Is it easy for people who are experts to say, I don't know, or can you explain this to me in another way?
So there's two things. One, I don't think this process is for everyone. Like, there are artists and technologists who are wonderful, but they're very particular about what they do, and they want to do what they do as they do it, which is amazing. You know, there's a sort of craftsmanship to that. And then there are artists and technologists, and this is when I talk about casting. I have conversations with people when I talk to my technologists, my artists. I go, I wait till the light goes on, and if the light goes on in the eyes, if they go, ooh, this is a good, when I have conversations about partnership, if anyone says, ooh, that's a good sign, that probably means that they're excited about doing something which seems fundamentally ludicrous. So there's a casting thing there. And then I think the second thing is that we do that thing where we bring everyone together and really explore. And, you know, I blissfully don't know a lot, so I say quite often, tell me more, I don't really understand what you're saying. And that sort of making it okay for everyone to say, I don't know, I think it's one of the most powerful sentences in interdisciplinary collaborations is, I don't get this, do tell me more, it looks cool. And I think with that attitude, you just open up new ways of looking at both things, the theatrical bit and the technology bit. And that's where the magic lies.
Thank you, Annette, Mees.
Thank you.